One of the things that you cover, and I really appreciate that, and I don't know if I think my fair tax book is over on my shelf over there, but I'm a big proponent of the fair tax, which is the consumption tax. I don't know
tax.
if it looked like you had read maybe you'd read that book from some of the stuff you said in there, that you would turn April 15th into just another spring day or something like that.
Exactly.
But, what is the difference between, we've already kind of bemoaned the fact that there's an income tax. What would be different or better about a consumption tax versus an income tax? Not adding it to, but replacing it with.
And that's what they've done in Europe. They have added the consumption tax to the income tax. The reason the income tax, if you had a flat income tax, that would be much better than what we have. But right now we have a graduated income tax. The top bracket is 39.6%. And then some cities like New York City have a lot more to stack on top of it, so you can end up with a 50% income tax on certain portions of your income.
Right.
The consumption tax, I get in trouble and people argue with me. I call it a national sales tax because that's what it is. It's a value-added tax. They tax it at each level of production, but the impact is a national sales tax. But when you get to the cash register, you don't see it.
Right.
You would just see the price of the product. In that product is going to be the tax, and then you have the state tax on top of it. So it's really a sneaky national sales tax, a value-added tax.
Yeah.
The advantage this would be is only when you spent money would you pay the tax. A lot of people think that your income determines your standard of living, and that's the case many times. But many times else it's not.
Yeah.
Because we've all seen people that spend way less than their income, and they may save the difference for whatever reason. But their income is here, but they're saving here. And so that what they're spending, that is their standard of living, whatever it might be.
Right,
so in terms of the standard of living, they would be equal to someone else who's spending that same amount of money because they're all paying the consumption tax. I don't think it'll ever happen.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll ever happen. It's considered to be a regressive tax.
Right.
But I think that it would be much superior to the income tax.
Well, I think in Neil Bortz, he wrote a book called The Fair Tax, and there's a bill. I forget the number of the bill, but there's a bill sitting somewhere in Congress that would implement the consumption tax. And the way they would deal with some of those issues is they would offer a monthly prebate. I don't know if you saw that, but that would help offset. So basically, you would untax the people below the poverty level.
It would also pick up on the illegal income. Because people that are spending illegal income obviously are not paying the income tax, and they're not going to.
Right.
But they would be paying the consumption tax.
Or
so that's an advantage.
Yeah, or if you go buy all the alcohol bottles and then sell them, sell them out on the black market, it would capture that eventually. So I think it would be. I think the danger would be. It would have to be done with much fear and trembling, I think, to not let it be just another tax that we add.
See, that's what's going to happen down the road, I think, because as we begin to stack up these trillions and trillions of dollars, and we're soon going to be talking about tens of trillions of dollars worth of additional debt, then somebody's going to have to say, how are we going to pay the interest on it and still meet Social Security payments? And when that happens, they're going to be looking at the value-added tax or the consumption tax.
Or, well, here's another thought I had, and this is we're getting into this point. What if they just, I'm afraid they're going to do this. I'm not saying they should, but I'm just afraid they're going to do this. Right now, the way it works is Congress will appropriate a bill. They will send it to the Treasury. The Treasury will issue debt. The debt is purchased by big banks and the Fed, and then that money is ultimately bought by the Fed. A lot of the times, probably here recently for sure, but they'll send a check back to the Treasury to spend the money on the things that the bills have been passed to spend the money on. So I just foresee a time when we're going to quit the charade and maybe the Treasury will issue like new currency. Maybe they'll send like $2 trillion over to the Fed to pay off the debt, that we owe, or the Fed will be willing to purchase this debt at a much lower rate than the market. So that may be a way to fix the interest rates by, raising $10 trillion in debt at 1% for 50 years or something.
I know. It's the money tree.
Yeah.
And it's going right now. I don't think it's going to be inflationary right now because basically we have sucked trillions of dollars out of the economy with the shutdown.
Yeah.
And then the federal government is putting trillions of dollars back into the economy.
Right.
With the CARES Act and various versions of that. But down the road, if we continue to do this sort of thing, that's what's going to happen. And we're going to build up inflationary pressures. The interest percentage of the federal debt is, particularly right now, we have almost zero interest rate.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to be forever.
No.
And when that changes, the portion of the federal government budget going to interest is going to be tremendous.
I'm just wondering, though, if the Fed will make a deal to just be willing to purchase debt at a much lower rate than market rate.
I don't know.
Why?
This is possible.
I'm just thinking that they might have to do that. Like that, you just might be in a situation where, like you say, I mean, if they let the rates go up with the market, I mean, it's just going to be it's already unworkable anyway. I mean, this is unsustainable, the course we're on.
Long term.
So
yes.
Long term.
I have a good friend of mine who's an economist. He said the United States is going broke. It's just going to take a long time.
Yeah.
And it is going to take more. Right now, our debt is about 100% of our gross domestic product. But it'll get to the 200% and maybe 300%. We can probably manage 200% or a little better, but once it gets much beyond that, then you're really skating on thin ice.
Yeah. So what's the fallout? I mean, what do you see happening eventually? If that, I mean, it could be 20 years, it could be 200 years, it could be 5 years, maybe. Probably not. But. Most
of the governments who have gone through that process end up with runaway inflation.
Yeah. That's
the way it's happened in most countries.
Yeah.
And it takes some monetary consistency really to squeeze inflation out, like in 1980 recession, 1981-82, where the Fed basically squeezed the economy, got inflation out of it. So I'm really concerned long term it'll be very inflationary. The government's just throwing money out there to trying to keep the wheels turning, and it leads to increased prices.
I think that's very likely, and I think this is a $10 trillion. You didn't know you were speaking to a 10 trillionaire, did you?
No, I didn't.
So there's my
that's great
Zimbabwean $10 trillion bill.
Okay, so. Absolutely. Well, these things have happened, and as you see right here. And it could happen in the United States. That's why we have to be careful. We can't just assume that the federal government can continue to spend way above its means and it'll go on forever. It won't.
There's a payday someday, as they say. So
no, it's not yet, but down the road.
Down the road. Yeah. I mean, there's got to be a payday. I mean, we've got to pay for our
One thing we can do to kind of moderate the problem is we've got to get the economic growth rate back. I mean, we were growing nicely up until the virus hit. We've got to get the economy growing. If we can get the economy growing, then that helps with federal government revenues.
Sure.
Obviously, their revenues are higher in a growth economy, so that's the key. And the federal government has not shown itself able to cut expenditures. What you have to hope is the economic growth will be fast enough so that the federal government can still grow, but not at an exponential rate. That's what we're looking for.
So what would be your prescription for fix it? Like if you were dictator for a day, but let's say within reason. I mean, obviously there'd probably be a whole lot of stuff we'd wave our magic wand. But what do you think are some reasonable things that have a possibility of getting implemented that could help?
If we would just take the virus off the table and take all of that and say it's a normal year, I think we ought to run it the same way the state governments do. You call your department chairs in and you say, okay, guys and gals, you're going to have 5% less money in the new budget than you had last year. You figure out how to make that work.
Right.
I'm not going to do that. You figure out how to make it. It's what the governor tells us. And that can work. That's the only way you can slow it down, because as long as you have this endless flow of cash, it's just a money machine. It'll never stop.
Money printer go brr. I don't know if you've seen those pictures. But it's just amazing. Because again, kind of like individuals, these people that get in power in government, and I have sympathy for them. Because in their minds they think, well, if I don't twist this knob, if I don't do this thing that I have the power to do, and something happens, it's on me, and I don't get reelected, and I've lost power. So there's some perverse incentives for people to spend way more than would be reasonable. And,
yes, they kick the can down the road because they know they won't be down there to have to deal with the issue in the future.
Right.